Carolyn Doobie here. What's the play for today? Well, I had been doing some paint pouring and I had a lot of fun, but the paint drips quite a bit on that, and I had it all collecting in the box down below. And over the course of the afternoon, beautiful patterns emerged. But then I realized, wait, what do I do with it? How can I capture those patterns? I don't want to lose those things. And I figure there are other people that might have run into this same problem when they've been doing paint pouring. Well, what I found is if you put a gel plate right on top of it, you can pick up all that pattern on the top. I mean, exquisite detail level. We're talking this kind of detail can get picked up with that gel plate. So that way, when you see all those beautiful things in your drippings in the bottom of the pan, you don't have to waste that magic. You can capture it. And I'm going to share how I do that in this video. So here's all the paint that's accumulated in the bottom of the box when I was doing some paint pouring. And I'm popping a gel plate right on there. And can you see all that detail that's under the plate? That's all going to stay there. Yep, that gel plate is going to lock that pattern, that color, all of that right in place. You also want to make sure that the plate has good contact with the paint, so that's why you'll see me push down anywhere where I think that I might have an air bubble. And by the way, the air bubbles are a lot easier to see in person than they are on camera. Now this is what the back side looks like. Not very detailed, but never fear, the front is completely and totally detailed. Now I'm going to keep doing this over and over again because I've got a ton of wet paint in there. I'm going to find a spot that's interesting and I'm going to pop that gel plate in, make sure I've got good contact, and then I'm going to pick it up. I find it much easier to pick these things up when I don't have gloves on, so I think I'm going to take these gloves off. That way I can grab these plates. I am just putting the gel plate in there. There's no plastic backing or any kind of acrylic mount for it. And the reason is I don't want to get all of this acrylic paint and pouring mixture stuff all over those. And what I found is when I'm doing this, paint does end up going different places. So what is it that I'm putting those gel plates on? Well, those are some plain old basic transparency sheets for a laser printer from the office supply store. It's basically uncoated plastic that the gel plate can easily sit on without any problem. And should any little bits of paint kind of run over to the side on them, I'm not going to sweat those one bit. Now this little rectangular one, I'm going to put it on a spot that I absolutely love the detail on. I'm going to push that down and all that detail is going to be there when this is all dry, on the front. On the back, it's going to look completely different. So the fronts and the backs do not actually have to have anything to do with each other. And remember how I said it's easier to pick these things up without gloves on? Yeah, but it's also pretty messy, so that's why I put those gloves back on. Now the back of that thing looks nothing like the front, and it's not going to matter because once these things dry completely, you will have all that detail, actually have detail on both sides, and you can pick which side you want to use. Now you've seen me using the Gel Press Petite so far, but you can use larger gel plates to do this too. The important thing is just getting it gently placed on there, making sure you've got contact between the paint and the plate, and that's going to lock that pattern in. Now so far you've seen me do this where there's plenty of paint to get on there so that you're seeing it fully covered. But what happens when you get near the end and you're almost out of paint, or there isn't quite as much runny gooey paint? Well, I'm going to show you here. This is one of the 5x7 gel plates, and as I push it down, I really want that pattern that's over there, but I can't get the paint to flow all the way to the edges. I'm pushing down, hoping to kind of squeeze it and squish it out a little bit, and it's just not going to happen. It's not going to make it. I'm going to have a part of that that doesn't have any paint on it whatsoever. So what am I going to do? I'm going to lift it up and I'm going to move it around and I'm just going to stick it right back down somewhere else because I actually do have plenty of paint in this box. I just need to get it in contact with that gel plate. That way it will lock in that pattern. Now the more that I do this, the more I'm disturbing the paint that was in the bottom of the box. The wonderful detail and the fine lines that I had in there when I started, those are gone because I keep putting things like gel plates on top of it and moving the paint around. What I found is every time that I do paint pouring, where that wonderful color drips off down into the bottom of the box, this has been my favorite way to use that paint. By getting that pattern captured on those plates, I then have these wonderful acrylic skins that I can then do all sorts of stuff with. And you're actually going to see me make some cards with them in this video. But before we get to that point, there's one other thing we need to do. There's something we need to check as these acrylic skins start to dry. Within about the first 10 minutes or so of drying, bald spots or bare spots will start to appear. Now, this isn't every time and on every one, and there are a lot of factors that go into it, including how much paint you used, what was in the pouring medium, and the different things that are in the paint that are at the bottom of the box. And my answer to this is to just put more paint on those bald spots. So anywhere there ends up being a little pocket, a little opening, I'm just going to use something like a palette knife. I'm going to scoop up some of the paint from down there, and I'm just going to drip it and fill it in on any of those bare spots. The reason why you want to fill those in is when you go to pull the skin off of the gel plate, it needs to be sturdy enough that it can handle being pulled off. And anywhere that the paint is too thin, like those bare spots, that's where it has a significant chance of ripping when you're pulling it off. Once you've got all those spots filled in, then you just need to let it dry. How long? Well, it depends where you live and how much paint and all those things. But for me, 24 to 48 hours is enough time for everything to be completely dry. Well, not everything. As I pulled this one up, there's wet paint underneath the plate. And that's because I had paint that was on the bottom that got trapped between the transparency and the gel plate, so air didn't get in there, so it didn't dry. So that's just a baby wipe that wiped it right off the gel plate. Not a problem. Now I'm going to peel off the first skin. I'm going to find a spot where I can grab it on the edge, and then I'm going to gently start to peel. The thicker the paint, the easier it is to peel off. The thinner the paint, the more delicate you have to be. The detail that was in that paint when I put the plate on it, it is still there. It has been locked, frozen in time. There was also a wee bit of magic happening that I wasn't expecting, but I was so happy that it happened, especially on the shapes like the circles. When I started peeling it up from one edge, it perforated or tore itself just perfectly so that any of the stuff on the sides of the gel plate didn't come up. So I had that perfect circle shape without having to cut or trim anything up. Most of these came off that way with the edges nicely done for me, but there were a couple spots where I had a lot of paint around the edges, and I did end up with a little excess coming up around the edges, so they weren't in that perfect shape. So what did I do on those little bits where that happened? Simply grabbed a pair of scissors and trimmed them up. So why am I taking my time with this square one? Well, that's because it was a thin layer of paint on there, so that means I have to be a little more careful as I'm pulling up, that way it doesn't rip. But it was worth it because look at the detail in that. Now, as I'm pulling off the larger ones, same exact procedure as doing it with the smaller plates. Why is it that there seemed to be so much more detail on those smaller plates than I'm going to get on the larger ones? Well, that's because they were the ones done first. So if I had chosen to use the larger plates first, that means I would have had more detail in those acrylic skins. Over on the blog at acolorfuljourney.com, I've got photos of these so you can really see the level of detail that is captured in them, and I'll have a link down below for you that'll take you right over to that blog post. To store these, you want to put them in something that they won't stick to, and by the way, they stick to each other like glue. So if you put something like a piece of wax paper between them, or just even a piece of copy paper, and store them that way, they won't stick to each other. So how can you use these skins? Well, you can use them in art journals, collages, or what I'm going to do here is I'm going to make some quick cards with them. I'm putting some gel medium right there on the back of that skin, and then I'm attaching it to a piece of colorful cardstock. And you bet that's a gel print there that I made that I simply tore it down to about the size of that skin so it would fit right on there. Now for this next one, I'm going to take one of the larger skins that I made, and I've got to pick which side I want to be the card. But I am just going to glue this down, and that whole thing is going to instantly become the card. I'm going to put the gel medium right on the card, then I'm going to have to pick which side I want to go with, and I'm going to line up the top line as best I can. Because the other sides, I'm not going to worry about them being perfect, because we're going to put this thing under the paper trimmer, and that's going to trim it up and give it really nice straight edges. But I'm only going to do that on the three sides, well, where the fold isn't. So that's why I lined up the fold. Now comes the really hard part here. I'm going to put these on top of the card blank. Yep, a little more gel medium back there, and I'm just going to pop them right onto that card blank, and that card is going to be finished and ready to go. Now I can feel that moisture starting to act up a little bit on there from the gel medium. It wants to sort of wrinkle or bubble up the paper, so I'm going to slow it down by putting a piece of cardstock there just as a buffer, just to be sure it doesn't stick to the next card that I'm working on. I'm going to get that one glued on. I'm going to bring another piece of paper, and then I'm going to put a weight on top of it. Just a little bit of weight. That box of baby wipes will be enough to keep it nice and flat while it's drying. When I ripped up the paper to be the background for the circle and the square shapes, I had some leftover bits, and I decided to use those to go along with this rectangular shape to go along the card. I'm not worried about my ends because they're going to get trimmed off very easily and precisely with a paper trimmer. What I'm more worried about is the top and bottom and if they're positioned in just the right spot. And because, well, I'm working with cardstock, it's being a bit pesky, I'm going to do a preliminary glue down here just so I can see if I've got the spacing for it in a way that I like. And then once I'm happy with it, I'm going to glue that thing right down to the card. But again, remember, I'm not worrying about those ends hanging off because we're going to cut those off in just a moment. If you're very good at cutting straight lines with scissors, you can absolutely cut these things with scissors. One thing I do recommend is that you wait until the gel medium has set up or dried. It makes it a lot easier to get a clean cut. I don't make good straight cuts on my own, so I'm going to use a paper trimmer to help me out. Now, making cards with the skins, that's just one of the ways that you can use them. They are fantastic for collage and for art journaling, really anything mixed media. Well, here are what the cards look like all together and finished. Now that I've used up the paint that was in the bottom of my box from paint pouring, I need to get it loaded back up with more color, so that means I'm going to be doing some more paint pouring. If you'd like me to share videos of that paint pouring, just let me know in the comments that you're interested in seeing those, and I'll make sure I get more of those added up here to my YouTube channel. And of course, hit that subscribe button, that way you'll know as soon as that video is live on the channel. Well, thanks so much for joining me for today's play. If you've been enjoying this video, I'd so appreciate it if you gave it a thumbs up. Want to see more of what I'm up to? Check out my blog at acolorfuljourney.com. Thanks so much for letting me be a part of your colorful journey.